Hello and welcome back to my channel. Oh god, it's hot. If you're new here, I'm Jackie and I'm a self-taught software engineer based in London, and I have a background in mechanical and aerospace engineering. And in this video, I'm gonna dive deep into the reasons why I left aerospace engineering. If you're a long-time subscriber, you probably know my background story, but if you're new here, I'm gonna give you a very quick recap. I studied mechanical engineering at the University of Aveiro in Portugal. I'm Portuguese. Throughout my studies, I developed a keen interest in fluid dynamics and thermal engineering, which led me to numerical simulation and CFD. CFD stands for computational fluid dynamics. So much so that I ended up doing my master thesis on aeroacoustics. So I was using CFD and CAA. CAA stands for computational aeroacoustics, to model and predict broadband noise on fan blades. And then I started trying to design fan blades to reduce this broadband noise. Even though my degree was in mechanical engineering, my master's was more focused on numerical simulation and fluid dynamics and also aeroacoustics because of my thesis. And aeroacoustics is a really big field in the aerospace industry. So when I graduated with an offer to join the aerospace graduate program at a very big aerospace company in Germany. During the graduate program, I got to work in 4 different departments in rotations of 4 to 5 months. I have to say that 2 of these placements were really cool, but then there were other 2 which, for me personally, they just weren't as interesting. And it was during one of these less interesting placements that I started learning JavaScript on Codecademy. Like, I just started doing an online course because I was a little bit bored. Like, not bored, but I felt a bit under-challenged in technical things, and I just decided to program on the side a bit. That is truly how all of this began, and 2 years later, after I started that course on JavaScript, I got the offer to join Amazon as a software engineer. The shift from aerospace engineering to software development was motivated by several different factors, which kind of collectively at the time just made software engineering more appealing to me personally. Aerospace engineering is a very slow-paced industry due to safety regulations and just the nature of the business itself. Testing any kind of new concept in this area is very time-consuming and very expensive. Even just running a simulation, for example, of the airflow around an aircraft, if you want to get meaningful results, you need to run the simulation probably for months on high-performance clusters until you get your results, which is obviously very expensive. An engineer that worked at the company I used to work at in Germany once told me that the concept of an MVP doesn't really exist in aerospace engineering, because in aerospace something either works perfectly in its entirety or it doesn't. So new ideas and changes are very difficult to pursue and to introduce in this industry. I was a bit disappointed by this, maybe because I was a graduate fresh out of university and I was a bit idealistic, and I had this idea that I would be able to contribute in very meaningful ways to a specific field, and it turns out that that is actually most likely not going to be the case. And now I want to take a quick break to thank the sponsor of this portion of the video. There are a lot of great resources on the internet that can help you get started in certain domains. I recently discovered HubSpot's free resources, and I think they're incredibly helpful if you're new to a certain topic. For example, they have an ebook introducing Python, which besides covering the basics as well as coding standards and best practices, it also explores which industries use Python and in which way. The ebook also shares online communities we can join, as well as interesting frameworks and other resources we can explore to learn more. I like having this high-level overview of how technology is being used in the real world, which is why I appreciate HubSpot's resources. There is so much free material on HubSpot about all kinds of interesting topics. If you guys want to check it out, there will be a link in the description of the video. And now back to the reasons why I switched to software engineering. Another key consideration for me was the feeling that I lacked impact in projects. To a certain extent, I was able to contribute in meaningful ways, but not in the areas where I was expecting to. I wasn't able to contribute in very meaningful ways on the engineering side, or so I thought at the time. I found myself being able to innovate more in areas that involved programming. It was my dream company to work for at the time, and I thought it was so amazing that I had gotten in. I had a lot of expectations and a lot of dreams, and instead I found myself facing a lot of blockers. That's when I realized that I had unrealistic expectations for my job, which is fine, and it was a process and I accepted that. The truth is that the aerospace industry has very established and very strict processes which need to be followed and respected. And while these processes obviously ensure safety and reliability, as an employee of these type of companies, that often means that your work is to follow these processes step by step. These processes are interesting and they are very technical, but once you fully understand them and you executed a few of them, it kind of gets a bit monotonous. And that was my problem with it. Another thing which interestingly bothered me at the time was that this is an industry where there's no tolerance for errors. For obvious reasons, that is necessary and it's good for everyone that that is the case. And as an employee of these type of companies, you do keep yourself to the highest of standards, which is obviously good. However, this work approach didn't resonate with me that much at the time because I had this mentality of trying and failing quickly and to work in this iterative way, which is very similar to what we do in software engineering actually. And that just doesn't mix well with the aerospace industry. So I was a bit like the ways of working were just very different from what I was used to or what I wanted to personally do at the time. Another aspect that drove this decision are the career prospects. Aerospace is a bit of a niche industry, and while you can have a great career in it, the number of companies that you can work for is very limited, at least compared to other areas such as, for example, software engineering. Also because many of these companies take your citizenship into account, which is something that we don't always think about straight away. Software engineering, on the other hand, is a field that has a broader spectrum of opportunities and industries that one can work in. And I also find that there are so many different fields within programming, and it's easier in the programming world to navigate these fields and to try out different things and work in different areas. It is easier than, for example, working in different areas within the aerospace industry. So in the end, software engineering does offer a wider range of career paths that I would consider for myself compared to aerospace engineering. Obviously, you can work as a programmer in the aerospace industry, especially if you're more interested in data science or embedded systems. There is a lot of work for the control systems of the aircrafts, of the aircraft engines as well. And there's also demand for data scientists in these fields because you need to understand a lot of things about the data and analyze it carefully. I actually tried this. I worked as a methods and tools development engineer, which is sort of the equivalent of a software engineer at the aerospace company. I did this for a year before changing to Amazon. Unfortunately, I was facing blockers almost on a daily basis, and it was very difficult for me to get access to data because everything was extremely confidential. Access is very restrictive, whether it is to data or tools or even just to be able to install something on your computer. Overall, the development environment was quite challenging, and this translated into many of my daily tasks being frustrating. So I didn't find the experience very enjoyable, even though on a high level it sounded like I was working on very cool, challenging projects. What I was actually doing on a day-to-day basis wasn't challenging in a good way, and it wasn't interesting. And this is in no way a criticism to the company I worked at or to the industry in itself. It's just that a more traditional engineering company will take much longer to set up a proper development environment for software engineers than a tech company, obviously. It's like completely different. Oh, this tea is so good. And lastly, I also realized that aerospace engineering is a tough area to work in if you ever want to work for yourself. Software engineering might be a bit saturated with freelancers and contractors, but I do think that if you're good at what you do and if you build a network, that you would much sooner be able to sustain yourself by working for yourself as a software engineer than you could ever as an aerospace engineer. One of the few areas where I see this could happen in aerospace would be to work as a consultant, but if that's the case, you need to be really, really good, and you need to have a lot of years of experience, and I'm talking about multiple decades. Another key consideration for me was culture and flexibility. Aerospace engineering is definitely a more traditional career path. I honestly don't need to have like super funky offices with free food available 24/7 and, you know, these crazy perks and being able to take naps in the office and all of that. Like, that is cool for sure, but I don't need that much. Like I wanted to be able to occasionally work from Portugal if I wanted to visit my family, and I couldn't do that when I was working at the aerospace company. I couldn't really work from home before the pandemic. It wasn't really a thing. All of this also had an impact on my decision because I do really appreciate the flexibility that we have in tech. In terms of compensation, at the beginning, I don't think there is a big difference between what I was making as an aerospace engineer compared to what I would make as a software engineer. In fact, maybe it would have been a bit lower, at least at the location I was at, if I had been a software developer. However, if you wish to long-term remain an individual contributor, I think that you can do much better in tech or as a software engineer in general compared to what you can as an aerospace engineer. In aerospace, unless you go into management, your salary will stagnate, like your total comp will stagnate a lot. And there aren't that many companies and that much demand as there is for software engineers. Not that it's easy right now to get another job as a software engineer, because it's not, but it is even more difficult as an aerospace engineer. Ultimately, those were the reasons why I decided to switch. I have to say, I do miss the physics a bit sometimes and the cool aspects of working on aerospace projects. And I'm not saying that I would never go back, because that's absolutely not true. It would definitely be something that I would consider. But at the time, it just didn't seem like a good match for the stage that I was in life. At the time, I was craving something that was a bit more fast-paced. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you found this video interesting. If you did, please leave it a like and subscribe, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!